Today's episode of the InsideEVs Podcast is brought to you by E-Range EV Tyre. E-Range EV tyres are specifically engineered for electric vehicles. Using an advanced manufacturing process called liquid phase mixing, E-Range EV's EcoPoint 3 technology creates a tyre with lower rolling resistance and longer range, while offering low levels of wear and high grip. All this while staying affordable. Go to erangetires.com. That's ERANGE tires.com to find your EV's next set of tyres.
Hello and welcome to the InsideEVs Podcast. Hey, everybody. Well, not more new faces. I guess now we're all like slightly familiar faces, but I'm new again. So glad to have you all here. My name is Seth Miersma. I am filling in for Alex Goy, who you just met last week, who is unfortunately ailing just a little bit today. So we are going to continue on. We're going to persevere, and we are going to talk about a lot of super interesting electric vehicle news today. Joining me, as has been the case for the last couple of weeks, we've got Hazel Southwell.
Hi.
Hi, Hazel. And Miss GoElectric, Laycee, good morning. Oh, you're muted, Laycee. We were. And we're unmuting.
Okay. Good morning, guys.
It's okay. Technical difficulties. I promise we're gonna carry on without issue after this. But so I just got back, you guys. I was in Monterey last week for Car Week. So I had a super interesting week, mostly doing stuff with non-electric vehicles. Unfortunately, a lot of vintage cars and stuff like that. I was around to see the debut of the Lamborghini that we're going to talk about in just a minute, but it has been a ton of fun. And then I'll be able to come on later, I think in a couple of weeks too, because I recently, just yesterday, was invited to go to a presentation very nearby me at the M-City testing facility in Ann Arbor, to see what Bollinger has been up to, and looking at a commercial vehicle, a commercial electric truck, which is going to be really, really interesting. I don't think they're going to let me drive it, but I'm going to ask for sure if I can. So would love to come back with that and chat with you guys about what old Bollinger is up to. How about you all? Any over the last week? What's been doing? What's been going on?
Me, I renewed my parking permit. About the most exciting car-related thing I've done in the last week. Yeah.
Well, we're happy you're legal, anyways.
I have been not only drooling over all of the EV content at Monterey Car Week, but I was also busy filming all week. I'm shooting a e-bike buying guide because I have so many people that watch my e-bike reviews and just viewers that I've met at events and stuff like that. They're like, I don't know how to choose between which e-bike I should get. So finally, I have like 50 e-bikes. So I've been spreading them out in each category and going over everything that they need to know in order to make the right decision when buying an e-bike. So I'm shooting that. And then this week also starting to shoot the EV kind of 101 series, a complete guide to going electric for those looking to get into an electric car. So lots of guides going.
Yeah, that's exciting. The e-bike stuff, especially, we've talked about this a bit, I think is really fascinating to me. And we're going to talk about electric bikes and some complexity therein in the US right now. But I'm really excited to see all of that content too. And you did, Laycee, maybe you guys talked about it and I missed it last week, but you did a big group ride too, yeah?
Yes. So I went out to Utah, just outside of St. George, kind of near where Zion is. And essentially, I'm doing this program where I'm going to 6 cities throughout the country, and I'm getting the community of Aventon is sponsoring it. So they're one of the biggest volume e-bike brands in the United States. And we're getting all of the community together. You don't have to ride an Aventon. You can ride whatever. But essentially, we're showing up at these different cities and riding around just to get the community together. And I have 2 more locations to go. Upstate New York is coming next month, September 16th. And then in October, I think 14th it is, we're going to Sarasota, Florida. So if you guys are in those areas and you want to meet up for a group ride, you can find the details on my website on missgoelectric.com.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds super fun. And having been through St. George a couple of times on vacation and on drive programs, I can at least attest to the fact that it's beautiful. It seems like it
Oh
would be
my
an amazing
gosh.
spot to bike ride.
Stunning. It was amazing. Yeah, it was one of my favorite rides so far because it was just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, very cool. Cool. We'll check those out, and we'll drop some links and encourage people to have a look too. So, well, why don't we talk about the first Lamborghini electric vehicle?
EV news.
In our first hit of EV news, I love that graphic. So well done, Kyle. Thank you. Yeah, so Lamborghini at the Quail debuted its first ever electric vehicle in concept form called the Lanzador EV Concept. It is, here we see the man in the tight trousers himself, Stefan Winkelmann, getting ready to debut the vehicle, pull the sheet off. This is very much a Lamborghini SUV. This is very much we're sort of seeing and seeing reference points to Ferrari's Purosangue and Rolls-Royce Spectre in terms of very high dollar, very high performance electric vehicles. Lamborghini seems finally set to enter that competition as well for your, God knows how much, $400,000 super SUV or super EV SUV, but not for 4 or 5 years, right? So we're at really early stages. So I guess, what are your initial reactions, guys? Both on the surface, like what we're being presented here in concept form, and the small information that we're getting about the vehicle, and then also about the effort in general. Like, Lamborghini is behind, which seems strange for a Volkswagen Group brand at this point.
I mean, cool. It looks like a Lamborghini, like if a Lamborghini was an SUV. So full points for that. Which, a lot of brands, their versions of this kind of thing do not look like their kind of core aesthetic. Whereas this, you would look at it and be like, why is that a Lambo that's like an SUV?
Sure.
But it looks like someone used a growth ray on it or something, or like me when I stand next to a lot of the rest of my family who are shorter than me or whatever. But I don't understand why it wouldn't be available for 4 or 5 years. It's a car that doesn't exist. Like
It's a
all the other
concept.
cars that don't exist.
Yeah. To me, it's interesting because the body form, I would have thought it would look a little bit more like the Urus, like it would be a little bit taller, but I get the aerodynamic profile needs to be optimized. But it looks like it's just like someone went like this and squished it. It's like it's almost like a coupe, like SUV type, I think they're calling it a GT, so that makes sense, but it's like a 2+2, so you're not really, it's not going to be like the mom mobile like the Urus is, kind of, for the rich people. But I don't know. I think it's a shame that it's taking so long. 2028 is when they said that that's going to come out. And it's kind of interesting to me because, like you said, Seth, Volkswagen not only has, several platforms under their big group that they could probably utilize to get this out quicker, but even, Porsche, how much sharing is going on as far as the investment that they have in Rimac, which is a really high performance brand. And we saw in the news that the Nevera set the record for the Nürburgring for an electric production car. But why is there no sharing going on there, or what's the deal? Why are they hesitant? Give us the real details. Why is it taking so long?
Yeah. So first, Ben Hillard, thanks for the comment. He says, to me, it looks like the wheels are oversized. I feel like more interesting cars will be released by 2028. So I think that we might all agree that the landscape of EVs in 2028 is going to be a lot more diverse and interesting. This will no doubt still have a lot of excitement behind it by then, as Lamborghini is just a big brand, right? Whether you can love Lamborghini or hate it, but you're going to be, there's going to be a high level of interest in what they're doing the first time. So, and I guess quickly on I think that you guys are right on. I will say, like, having seen this now in person, it doesn't even read on the video we're watching and in the photos that we've seen. You don't even quite get the size, like the scale, as in the same way when you're standing there. You can see it a little bit when Winkelmann is right there, that this is a really sizable SUV. It's a lot taller. It's every bit as wide as you would expect it to be, and it's a lot taller than I expected it to be from seeing the photos too. So it's quite big. But the other,
looks like someone just lifted a Lamborghini.
yeah, well, and I do think that that's kind of in the DNA of what they're doing right now. Like it's sitting right next to Sterrato, which is their off-road focused sort of supercar, which is a bit of a strange thing. Obviously, automakers can't go wrong doing more SUV-ized versions of their vehicles these days, so that all makes sense. But on the development point and the time frame, because I agree, right? Like, it feels like Volkswagen is right there in terms of having the platforms and the battery and motor technology that they should be able to have to bring something to market a lot quicker, especially with their partners. I had a really quick conversation with this guy, with Stefan Winkelmann, a year ago or 2 years ago, talking about electrification at Lamborghini. And the point that he made to me at the time was that, electrifying, essentially hybrids were obviously on the roadmap and something they knew that they could do and they could do well. But the weight involved in having a battery big enough for the performance that they required was something that they really hadn't cracked yet for, in his words, a super sports car. So, one of a supercar, not an SUV, in other words. So I would have thought that going to more of an SUV form factor would have meant that they would have had latitude to work a bit with off the shelf parts, as opposed to what they seem to be doing now, which is, no, we're going to do something that's fully Lamborghini from the ground up, and this is going to be the vehicle to show that. So they're putting themselves in sort of a strange place, I guess, now.
They could be the first kind of like luxury brand in the family of luxury brands that have been doing this to make an SUV and make it unprofitable. So that's groundbreaking.
That's what I was thinking, is like, gosh, they're killing themselves. If a big group like that, you got to rely on the scale of all your other technology to be able to incorporate it in a way that makes sense financially. Ooh.
Yeah, well, and who knows, like on a per unit basis, because we have no idea what this thing will cost, right? Like it wouldn't be that unusual to find out that it was in excess of $400,000, for instance, with a Lamborghini badge. But I guess if we're looking at this kind of glass half full, do you think that there's a chance that this portends, like a next generation of tech, of specifically battery tech, that we haven't seen yet, because it's so far out, and because this thing is going to have crazy requirements, right? It's going to have to be incredibly fast. We know already that it's got, I was yelling this on the Motor One podcast the other day, 1 megawatt is just fun to say, but it's going to have a ton of power. It's going to have to be, reasonably great in terms of handling, and it's going to have a huge range number, right, to justify, I think, what it's doing with the brand and it taking that much time. Am I way off base there? I think they've got to have crazy targets for this.
Yeah, I agree, and it feels like by saying 2028 for something that they clearly have made a chassis for, or like
right.
a significant amount of the design work has happened, because this isn't like a render or something. Like there is a physical car, and I think like what it sounds like to me is that they're basically thinking something is going to come along, so they're not happy with the VW Group's current platforms. They're not happy with doing something based on like the Taycan technology or whatever, or the shared kind of Taycan e-tron stuff.
Sure.
And they're waiting for something, because Audi. So for VW Group development, Audi is going to have a F1 power unit before this SUV is going to come out.
Right. Yeah, no, those are all great points. So there's a lot of stuff in the works, I think, that will make this fascinating. The F1 point is really good. I was just hanging out with Audi last weekend, and they was reminded of the fact that when they're retiring R8, they're hinting at their own kind of replacement for that and sort of a super sports car. That's going to be very much tied up in their F1 effort coming. Is that next year or 2 years from now? I can't remember.
2026. So it's when F1 will be 50-50 electric and
Right.
Combustion.
I think Stefan said also that is like pretty much production intent, like what you're seeing there. A lot of these brands will come out with a concept and it's far off from what you see when it gets to production. But I read in a couple articles that he said that this is pretty much baked, like as far as what you're seeing. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I don't think that there's a lot here that, again, having seen it in person, we've seen and we've published, photos. It's got a full interior, right? Like they've done the matching luggage already. It's not going to be exactly what you see here. One of the commenters brought up, I think Ben brought up the huge wheel size. I believe it was wearing rubber that said these are 24-inch wheels, right? So we are talking about, that's large. The wheel itself might be a little bit strange. Those look extremely expensive, but I think you might be close to like 90-ish% of what the production vehicle will look like right here, and it's very directional today. It's not that much of a concept. So
besides the mirrors missing.
Well, that's like in Europe, they're already doing that. I mean, they're not doing mirrors,
cameras.
They're doing the little wing camera thing. So even that seems like it could happen. Although that's a clear concept car trope, right? Getting rid of the mirrors that are going to come back and just ruin the silhouette. Quickly, because this bugs me too, it also, even in concept form, has normal doors. They don't go like this, which is really sad. So that also, I guess, to me, indicates that this might end up having 4 doors or longer doors, so that there's more usability in that 2+2 layout, which is, I suppose, great for somebody who's very wealthy, wants an EV, and has a couple of kids.
I know that's the reason why you're not getting one, Seth. Let's just be real.
I am going to be, my hand will be raised as soon as the order banks opened up, of course, considering, well, if certain financial windfalls come my way. No, all right. Super interesting, and more to come from Lamborghini. Obviously, we'll be watching to see how the storyline develops slowly, and come back here in August of 2028 for more on where Lanzador ends up. All right, let's pivot to something from very large scale and very expensive to smaller scale, much less expensive in many cases, and more accessible. E-bikes. Laycee, obviously we've already started talking about it. Like you are, I didn't know that you had 50.
I know, it's ridiculous.
That's kind of bananas, but we had a story. This one is this was a little over a week ago that we ran this story, and I wanted to talk about it today because it was just getting a lot of comments and sort of really in-depth commentary too on InsideEVs.com. So there is a organization called People for Bikes, which is a special interest group for the bicycle industry in the US, right? So it's kind of I don't know if technically it's a lobbyist organization, but it ladders up to that. And they're sort of pushing for e-bikes and micro mobility products, battery powered mobility products, to be removed from what we call right to repair legislation in the US. So they're essentially looking, and they've achieved this in New York State at least. Had some failures in other states. We know that in Minnesota they were not able to get this. But what they're saying essentially is that it is dangerous for individuals to be able to repair their own e-bike batteries or e-scooter batteries. And so they don't want to provide the same level of tools and software and access to technical bulletins, or not bulletins, but technical manuals and things like that, so that people and other independent repair shops are able to sort of easily work on your e-bike, right? So they're closing it off. They're trying to make this a little bit more the realm of just the manufacturers of the e-bikes. And it's really interesting because I think that one of the things that this triggers, especially in a lot of American drivers, is similar things have been in the proposed over the years to regular kind of ICE powered vehicles, and there's been a huge pushback on that, especially in the enthusiast community, because we've had essentially 100 plus years of owning cars and working on cars ourselves, right? So I do think we can start there, right? There is this knee-jerk, well, I don't want to say knee-jerk because there's some really considered comments, but there is a reaction to this idea, right? I bought a thing, now I own it. You're not allowed to tell me whether or not I can repair it, modify it, or do anything like it, right? Is this valid? I guess, is this happening with e-bikes? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, if you hadn't seen the articles, New York City, they're really cracking down on this topic, because what ends up happening here is people buy really cheap, almost like black market e-bikes, and they have super cheap batteries that don't have, if you plug it in with the charger, it might be the wrong charger, or it's a cheap charger and it doesn't have a battery management system where it's going to stop it from charging to a certain extent. And people, when those batteries go bad, what they're doing is they are opening them up and trying to repair them themselves. And what's happening is that these really cheap batteries and cheap bikes, since they're working on these cheap components, they catch fire. So you probably have heard in the news, this e-bike fires in New York City. And so they're cracking down, and they're proposing legislation that the e-bike batteries need to be UL certified, which that's something that I tell people if you want to look out for. I mean, I do have 50 e-bikes, and some of them are UL certified, but they're all in storage, and I have not, over the years of reviewing them and having them in storage, have never had any kind of incident. You kind of have to be mindful of how you're maintaining your battery, and it's kind of similar to an electric car. Is in extreme cold temperatures or really hot temperatures, your battery will degrade quicker if it doesn't have a cooling system. And in these e-bikes, they don't really. They just rely on you taking the battery off the bike and bringing it inside to charge, or when you're in that time of year where it's super cold or it's super hot, then you want to make sure it's at a consistent temperature so it's not, damaged or anything like that. But the main reason in the e-bike world why they're catching fire is because people are trying to repair themselves. So I think this is a valid concern, and I think it's, I think there should be provisions as far as yes, you shouldn't be able to disassemble the battery and work on it in a place like New York City where you're literally affecting the lives of so many people that live on many floors above you or below you if you catch the whole building on fire. Right. But it's mostly because people are mishandling the situation. It's not necessarily just because the batteries just catch fire for no reason. So unfortunately, like we see with electric cars that catch fire, those make the headlines a lot, very often, even though the numbers don't tell the same story of electric cars catching on fire. There was last year an article that came out, a study by Auto Insurance, and they basically found that what catches fire most often as far as cars goes is hybrids, and then gas cars, and then EVs are last. So every 25 or something like that EVs per 1,000, I can't remember exact figures, but they were the least product to catch fire. So I think headlines tend to scare people, but I think it's valid that right to repair is a thing, but also they should probably restrict the battery since they do catch fire if you do mess around with them.
Yeah, I think so there's obviously two sides to this. One is that there is, like Laycee said, there's this popular kind of conception that EVs just go on fire spontaneously, which they don't. And actually, last week or this week, this week, I don't know what day it is. I've been working a lot. But yeah, there was a fire on this Dutch cargo ship, the Fremantle Highway, and everyone went, oh, it's the 500 EVs. And then it turned out this week that none of them even caught fire. It was everything else on the ship that burned. And in the same way that the Felicity Ace, everyone's like, it was a Taycan that started it. No one knows what started the Felicity Ace fire, or at least it certainly hasn't been announced. It would be very unlikely to be a Taycan that was just sitting there probably without any charge in its battery or minimal amounts of charge in its battery. And like, the things that potentially make batteries catch fire are charging incidents where you get some kind of thermal event that gets out of control. Potentially, during use, you could get, like, if something was really abused, or an impact in where the battery is pierced, or someone peeling it open, with a tool. Right. And like, I feel like it should not need saying that you should not open battery packs.
Sure.
I say this as somebody who does, but like, because I have a long-running chemistry project to extract lithium from the batteries from used vapes. Even that is really dangerous. And like, I try and do it outside my home. I try and do it in an area where there's, if something does happen, then like, I'm not going to set fire to anything. Because like, even a tiny battery with like 400 megaamp hours or whatever is really dangerous. But then I think right to repair. So right to repair should mean that you can replace your own brakes. You can maintain the bike. You can do whatever. You can replace that battery pack if it goes bad. Right to repair does not involve doing things that would not be done outside of a laboratory or a factory, and might actually have a robot to do it in a factory because it's so dangerous. Like,
yeah.
And I think there's just a line to draw there somewhere.
I think that's right. And I think one thing to point out, and you guys are both reinforcing, is when we're talking about electric cars, like we're talking about an industry that is already highly regulated globally, right? Everywhere has so even where even when we're dealing with new technologies, we're generally speaking about companies that have enough invested in the health and safety of their consumers and the durability of their products, not wanting them to catch on fire being a big part of it, right? Like they have a sort of there's a baked in system there to keep that a little bit more safe, right? And to have fail safes within the products and presumably within the batteries as well, so that they are not going to have a catastrophic failure like this. The e-bike thing is, it's still kind of the Wild West in the US. I had a stat from ABC News that said the micromobility devices scaled up from 288,000 sold roughly in 2019 to an estimated 1 million in 2022, right? So we're talking about close to a sort of 4x change in 3 years. That's going to continue to jump up from here. And I think that part of what we're seeing now is an uncertain regulatory environment in the United States where, Laycee, you just said it, right? Black market bikes. I talked about it a little bit, like on the first time I was on this show, that I've got, so I get pitches from Chinese companies that I've never heard of before who want us to review e-bikes and e-scooters mostly. Have gotten a couple, and they're not packaged in a way that like reassures me. They're not sent with the sort of documentation that you would expect for a product like that's fairly complex at that price point and things like that. So some of this is, I don't want to say it's going to sort itself out, because I think that the figuring out things like right to repair is part of that process. But a lot of this is just because this industry is pretty new too. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these e-bike companies that are trying to come here. And basically what happens, with your point to the Chinese especially bikes, is that there's this catalog of, oh, this is the frame you can buy, this is the battery you can buy, this is the controller you can buy. So some brands are just popping up and being like, yes, I want that from that and that and that. And then they're just putting it all together and then trying to get down to the cheapest price because it's such a competitive field at this stage. But ultimately, there will be consolidation. Not everyone is going to survive. That's just a natural progression of the industry. But yeah, I think that to your point, it's like there are so many options out there, and most of the people that are actually buying these really cheap bikes are the ones that feel as if they need to fix them because they can't afford otherwise. Right. But, New York, it's passing this heading towards passing this UL certification mandate for the city, I think is just the tip of the iceberg as far as regulation, because not only from battery safety, from that element across the United States, but also, you know, speed regulations. Some of these bikes go over 30 miles per hour. And the nice thing about having an e-bike is that you don't have to register it or insure it or any of these other things that you would with a typical scooter or a motorcycle. So it is the wild, wild west right now. And I know a lot of companies that I've sat down with, a lot of CEOs from bike companies, some in California, that have specifically said they're trying to get ahead of it and trying to work with the government because they want to make sure that they're going to not get stuck in a situation where they have all these bikes made and then all of a sudden that they can't sell them, or, you know, they get in a situation it's unprofitable for them. So it'll evolve over the years, but it is the wild, wild west. You nailed it there.
Yeah, it's also strange, and this is a a thing that happens in the United States or around even global products that are sold in the U.S. because it's such a large market, right? When we see state by state regulations that differ, that fight each other, until California gets involved, right, and sort of sets the standard that forces industry to go that way because the market is so large. It's really difficult, right? Like we're talking about sort of state standards and not federal standards. It's really difficult for a manufacturer, even one that has like global intentions or larger scale intentions when they're new, to say, we're going to build a product to this standard, to this safety standard, because we know that as a commercial question, we have to, or we will not be allowed to sell it, or people won't be confident buying it in big markets. This is also true, I'm sure, in the European Union and UK as well, right? Where it's like if you have differing standards in a geographically sort of central location, it's going to be difficult for one product to go there and hit all of those targets in many cases.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also, I think there has to be a significant amount of regulation of these, partly because and a significant amount of like uniformity and stuff that needs to come in, because right now e-bikes are like, like Laycee said, she has 50. There are people who run through quite a lot of them. There's certainly companies running through a lot of them. Like if you think about all of the ones that are, I don't know if this is the thing in the US, but in London, you can't walk down the pavement without, or a sidewalk even, sorry, without like loads of e-bikes strewn all over it. They're really heavy. They've obviously got battery packs in there, impossible to move when they're not activated. Like you physically have to pick the thing up. And all of that is e-waste. All of that is proliferation of stuff. Like the reason I have my project about trying to extract lithium from vapes is because I think there's 2 every second being thrown away in the UK. And like, these are all batteries that we have to deal with down the line. Like these are things we have to recycle. Those, whether it's somebody doing something inadvisable in their New York apartment or the whole world in, 2-3 years, these are things that have to be dealt with.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's a great segue into our next news story too. I have so many more questions. I think that we're going to have the opportunity to talk about e-bikes kind of a lot going forward. So I'll pop on. Yeah, because I do want to know about people out there who are kind of hot rodding these things right now. But why don't we can save that for another topic. Because Hazel, you bring up a great point. From vapes to e-bikes, we're now consuming millions of these globally, to everything else that has a lithium-ion battery, our phones, our laptops, and certainly EVs. What we do with them, the life cycle of especially electric vehicle batteries, has been really a really hot topic, a really interesting topic for a lot of people on both sides of the equation. I would say I've heard people question the sort of viability of obtaining the materials to make batteries, and then what we do with them. What do we do with all these EV batteries when they're done? Essentially, has been an argument brought out by people who are essentially pretty antagonistic to EV adoption in general. So, with that as prelude, we had a really interesting article, a great video from a YouTuber, Jerry Rig Everything. He went to a battery recycling facility in Arizona, outside of Phoenix, I believe, and showed just an amazing video. Like, this brought out my inner sort of 7-year-old watching Mr. Rogers videos about how things are made, about all of these batteries going into this giant machine filled with a mysterious black liquid that shreds them up, and then, is able to pull out various component parts. I guess, Hazel, let's start there. This process is incredible. Like, this is something that obviously we're going to need to figure out how to do at scale pretty quickly, right? Like, this kind of operation is going to have to scale up soon if it isn't already. Talk about what we're seeing here, and if you can, tell me what might be in that proprietary black liquid. Those are my initial questions.
Right. So in the theme of me being like really villainous,
yeah,
this is a really basic, crude process. Like, so what happens is that, and there's a lot of, so I don't know specifically what LI Cycle are doing. I obviously don't have knowledge about the absolute specifics of their process, but generally how plants that are operating this way are operating is that they shred the batteries and then basically dissolve them in acid. They say that it's a water-based process, which I think is probably that they're shredding the batteries and then the plastics float. They use a magnet or magnets to separate metals and stuff like that. And then the black mass, which is what all of the kind of elemental bits of a battery. So by metals, I mean like the packaging, not the lithium, and whatever, when they're separating out that bit. The black mass is the problem to a large extent, because that is unprocessed God knows whatium, basically. It's got the cobalt, the lithium, the nickel, kind of all of the battery chemicals, and that it said in this video goes somewhere else. So basically this is a big old crushing machine with some acid, which the fact that it can handle lots of different batteries, the fact that it can handle very small phone batteries and car batteries like that, I don't want to be too down on this. It's also the best process that we currently have for doing this. And there is, a lot of reasons to be optimistic that these processes are things that can be done, and done in a way where it's like actually a realistic business proposition, because we do need this to be something where people are interested in doing it for money. And although shredding stuff and drenching it in chemicals isn't non-energy intensive, and the subsequent processing of the black mass, which like sounds so metal,
yeah,
like,
absolutely,
actually it's like
the black mass.
Yeah, like I do really like it. Like, batteries are cool now.
Yeah,
but well, I mean, I always think batteries are cool, but like, I appreciate that's my thing. Yeah, the fact that this is something that can realistically be done is good. And although it's energy intensive, it is less energy intensive than mining the materials. So it uses a lot of water, but like, if you think about the amount of water that's used, say in the Atacama salt flats in Chile to actually extract lithium, which is about the least energy intensive way you can get lithium, then this is actually a very acceptable method, and something where we can do it now, which there's a lot of stuff that might be better, but it's like a little bit lab stage. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this. I'll slightly end on a less villainous note.
First of all, Black Mass, I don't have it, but Black Mass is a Sabbath record. It's a Black Sabbath record, which is, I think, great. I'm also looking it up. I think that it's also the name of an album by about 6 or 7 other metal bands. So maybe we can put together some sort of playlist.
Hello, Cleveland. We are Black Mass.
Exactly. It's amazing. Truly the best bit of marketing that's come out of a recycling organization that I've seen in a long time. So Hazel, you said it too, and I'm sort of asking, like, is this scalable? But you're right. The question is, can it be profitable, right? So we don't know with this organization. It'd be interesting to sort of reach out and find out if that's the case, but they're not doing this for the good of the world, right? They're not doing this because they're altruistic. And I think I would venture to say that many other organizations that are interested in this kind of business want to do it to make money too. Do we have any line of sight? To whether or not this can be scaled for profit?
Oh yeah. Like, what's interesting, okay, this isn't the only company that's doing that. There's a ton of companies. Monroe even went out to a company called Recylico or something like that. And obviously, if people follow Tesla at all, they probably know of redwood materials. But this is like, what bothered me was, like, I think it was like sometime this past year, I listened to a podcast, Dax Shepard's podcast. He had Jerry Seinfeld on. I love cars, so I like to hear, I like his show of the cars and coffee thing. He went on his show and he said, oh, with these EVs, I hate them, blah, blah, blah. And why is no one talking about where these batteries go? I'm like, people are talking about it. I'm sorry you're not reading it, Jerry. Jerry, come on. But this is like throwing away money. Like, these raw materials, it's just a really important part of the process. And a lot of major automakers have had programs with companies like Li-Cycle or Redwood Materials. A lot of the majors like Volkswagen, Ford, Nissan, like a ton of these guys, Panasonic, all have deals with these big companies in order to try to make it more circular because, with internal combustion engines, that is just gone wasted into the air as far as your fuel goes. Whereas in batteries, we can break them down to basically the raw materials and repackage them and put them in the new products, in the new cathodes and anodes. And so if people can be making money off of this, I think that's great. And it also reduces, like Hazel said, going to these mines and keep mining and mining and mining for all this material. Redwood at the beginning of the year said that they had 12 months of, knowledge based on their year of collecting batteries. And they collected over 500,000 pounds of materials, broke them down, and they said less than 5% were because the batteries were, degraded or recalled or anything like that. So it's more of a concern of getting enough of the batteries at this stage because there's still EVs that are on the road that have been on the road for like 10 years or so plus, that they need to up that level, but they collect laptops, batteries, they collect cell phones. So, and they have dropping points that you can, as yourself a consumer, instead of throwing away like your laptop battery or your cell phone, you can go in. Audi has in their dealerships a place where you can drop off those materials and they get sent to Redwood to be remanufactured, reprocessed, and broken down into those materials. So I really love this recycling element because we want a more circular economy, and the processing of these materials is usually sent to China. So if we can localize it here and create jobs here in our market, and I think that's just really great for the whole industry. And it's also part of the IRA. So
I was going to say that, like, this is becoming much more profitable, both in the US and in the EU, because of the protectionist legislature that's coming in. The EU literally mandates a percentage of recycled components that is being used in batteries and stuff, and recyclable components. And the IRA, obviously, I find it very weird referring to the IRA as like a piece of US legislature, because I'm an elderly British person, but like that incentivizes car companies because they will not, the consumer at the end point can see where your supply chain is, and they can see where you're getting that lithium from, where you're getting those elements that are going into the car.
And another note on that, just to kind of ping off of the news, talking about Redwood Materials in particular, it was, if you guys don't know, founded, and the CEO is J.B. Straubel, who came from Tesla. He was a longtime executive at it, one of the top guys at Tesla, and he actually just stole, I should say, Colin Campbell, who was the head of powertrain at Tesla for the last 17 years. He just moved over to Redwood And normally I would say, you know, they're taking a lot of their guys over at Redwood, but I think considering JB just got on the board at Tesla, they still have a really good relationship. So I'm excited to see how that kind of develops. But
talk about a circular economy.
Yeah, right.
But Brian Jackson points out, and he actually raises a question that I kind of had. Handheld device batteries live a short life. EV batteries live 15 plus years and often get reused long before battery recycling. 10 years ago, 12 years ago or something, I was in China with BMW and they were touting their ability to take then, you know, sort of nascent EV batteries and put them next to their design center in kind of a stack that was then, you know, hooked up to a solar array. So it was powering the building in some form or function. I know Nissan was also had similar designs for a long time, kind of on the conceptual stage of how you're going to be able to take your Leaf battery after it was no longer viable for use in your vehicle and essentially stick it in your garage and hook it up to your power system at home so that you're able to have a battery backup, right? I'll be honest, I just need to ask, like, are any of those programs automaker or not? Like, are those continuing to develop as well? There's this middle stage where an EV battery might not be good enough, might not have the performance that it needs to drive your car, but it might still be really great for years and years to sit stationary in one location and serve as a backup for your home power system.
There's loads of those schemes happening. So like an interesting, like one of the quirkiest ones is that the Extreme E Paddock, which is like an electric off-road racing series, has a load of Second Life batteries that used to be in Swedish buses. But like, and if they can use them, then like anyone can use them. And there's also Audi have been doing a lot of Second Life programs. They've got a Second Life program in partnership with a German-Indian company that sent all of the prototype e-tron batteries into Second Life, powering localized grids, off renewables. We have a huge need for those stationary batteries coming in, for Powerballs, for being able to have that home storage of energy, basically. And that is the most sensible thing to do with an EV battery, basically, because you don't, I mean, like Laycee mentioned, Redwood saying that like only 5% of batteries had anything wrong with them or weren't really fit for purpose. Like they need to go on to a Second Life realistically. And yeah, that's going to be a super, super important thing. I would say there's a lot less of a developed economy for doing that than there is for recycling. And that does come down to what Brian mentioned, which is that recycling, there are loads and loads of mobile phones. There are loads and loads of, it's, I think I worked it out, and the equivalent of 9.5 Mercedes EQS batteries in lithium are being thrown into landfill in the UK alone in the form of disposable vapes. I think that's every month. And like the Mercedes EQS batteries are not ending up there, but there is a lot of lithium that can be kind of garbage mined from other sources.
Yeah, it's really fast, and obviously we're sort of moving towards, again, like sort of figuring this out, but a hybrid solution where we're going to have multiple ways of profitably or beneficially dealing with the batteries that are coming out of EVs specifically. So cool stuff.
Money, 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 money.
Gotta have it. All right, let's. We had a bunch of other stuff to talk about today, but we are going a little bit long, I think, in a great way. And we wouldn't be the Inside EVs podcast if we didn't have just a little bit of Tesla news, right? There's always something. Indeed, and we might just have to remake that graphic to say Cybertruck news, at least for the next year, because it's been nothing but Cybertruck for the last 3 weeks. Anyways. With that said, Elon was on Twitter, was on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, recently, as is his wont. Actually, any number of times over the last week. But we're honing in on I'm sorry, I've got this wrong. This was not on Twitter. This was an internal email that was circulated that some of the Cybertruck forum members found and published, and then we found, talking about the potential for Tesla panel gaps to get a lot better, which is something that, you know, as EV insiders or people who have just kind of observed you know, the landscape or their parking lots over the last few years, we've definitely had a lot of conversations about Teslas of all stripes having sort of poor build quality in the form of badly fit panels. So Cybertruck, with the way that it's designed, with the, you know, like sort of raw steel panels and very straight lines, is prone to showing gaps more than a kind of standard design car, which can be a little bit swoopier, which can hide those things in different ways, right? So Musk is tackling this head on in a typically sort of extreme way, in a bullish way, and wrote, and I'll just read this for those of you who are listening and not watching. Due to the nature of Cybertruck, which is made of bright metal with mostly straight edges, any dimensional variation shows up like a sore thumb. All parts for this vehicle, whether internal or from suppliers, need to be designed and built to sub 10 micron accuracy. That means all part dimensions need to be to the third decimal place in millimeters, and tolerances need to be specified in single-digit microns. If Lego and soda cans, which are very low cost, can do this, so can we. Precision predicates perfectionism. Very, just like, I mean, first of all, I've been listening to the new Patrick George and The Verge have a Tesla podcast, which I encourage you guys all listen to. It's really great. The only reason that it occurred to me now is they have an AI that reads all of Elon's quotes in Elon's voice, which I think that we need to develop or steal, because that would be great for something like this. Let's start with this, because I'll tell you, like right off the top of my head, when I was reading this, I did not really have a sense for the scale of a micron. As usual, some really pointed commenters on InsideEVs called some of this stuff out. But a micron, for those of us who are not on the metric system, is a millionth of a meter. So there are 1,000 of them in 1 millimeter, which is quite small. The comps that I was able to easily find are a red blood cell is 5 or 6 microns, and a human hair is 75 of them. So right off the bat, right, we are not actually dealing with reality when we're talking about tolerances in single or even 10 microns, right? Is this Elon just trying to get the troops fired up and a little bit scared to get the production standards up to par? Or is he confused about his measures?
Like, genuinely, he's throwing that word around, but the issue, like, if there is a visible gap in a truck's bodywork, that is not down to the kind of fit, the sizing of the panels. It's probably not down to any of the parts. That's down to how it's been put together. Like, we've all probably made a model kit that looked amazing at some point in our lives, and then looked at what we actually did and be like, and that's fundamentally how you are getting these gaps. It's to do with the production process. It's to do with the way things are being put together. Probably there are elements of the design that are making them hard to put together. There's probably elements of the actual manufacturing that is exacerbating that to some extent. And the fact that Tesla have traditionally not really cared about this is definitely probably a third aggravating factor. But ultimately, this is not to do with measuring size of things in microns. That's just like, he does like to pretend he's an engineer. And like, there's no one, that is not a microns gap. That is not like a gap smaller than a human hair. That is a gap you can see from like 5 yards away. Yeah, I mean, like, being metric, but like, I don't know. It just sounds like he's like late night sending off emails.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of that, and what we're looking at too. Cal just had it pulled up. Was there's another story, really, you know, again, all Cybertruck all the time, but this is the one that Elon tweeted about, going to drive a, what did he call it? Not production ready, but production possible
candidate,
something like production candidate version of Cybertruck. And we got some photos of it, and of course, not that difficult to see. We've got it now up on the screen if you guys are watching on YouTube with the gaps circled, but you can see what seems to be a variance in the gap anyways, from on the front of one door from the gap sort of behind it, and then one that's a little bit more egregious where the panel that's under the light, the front light, has a big sort of it gets larger as it goes up to the top corner, right? This is going to be a design that's prone to this, right? Like if there are problems with either the production of these panels or the manufacturing, the fit of them afterwards, you're going to see it more often. And I think it's something that, like, to your point, Hazel, like, it hasn't really slowed down Tesla sales. This is not a new thing, right? And it hasn't been meaningful to the consumer or to the customer that Tesla has right now. So I don't think that we're necessarily going to see a revolution with Cybertruck. Is that fair?
I mean, but years ago, Elon said, oh, we're going to tighten up, on Model 3 and these other products to make it so that it can be, competitive with what people expect with the Germans and the others that are leading in the build quality category. So he's been saying this for a long time on his products. They've been wanting to tighten up the fit and finish. From me, like, looking at this, like, yeah, stainless steel, that's going to be quite the challenge for you to get it perfect, not only because of the panel gaps, but also just the surfacing, like any little dent or any, like, it's, and you can see these are pieces that are single form pieces that they bend. They don't, like, weld them or anything like that. So that is quite the feat, 10 microns that he's aiming for. I think it's good to have those kind of goals, but are they going to be practical? Probably not. Like, I think it's interesting that this is the production candidate, which it looks pretty good considering. And if you are having that in the back of your mind that Tesla doesn't have the best of build quality, then you're kind of like, okay, this looks, pretty good for what it is and how challenging this product is. And it's going to be, like, probably hands down the most challenging product that they build. It's so complicated and no one's really made a car that is of this shape and complexity. And although they said that they were going to do a giga casting, it's going to be one single piece. As far as the innards go, it's like we've seen evidence that so far it's not. It's multiple. So they got goals.
I will say this, like, I appreciate, and this is, I mean, Tesla in general and Cybertruck in particular, the degree of difficulty is great, right? Like, to your point, like, they're trying something that's hard. They're trying something that will, when this product is on the street, when this vehicle is on the street, people are not going, normal people will not notice the panel gap, even if it's off first. What they're going to notice is the wheeled spaceship that's rolling down their street, right? It will absolutely blow minds, even though it's been something that we've been talking about and seen photos of forever. We tend to forget that, like, because we largely do this for a living, it's old hat to us and we're in the minutia of it. But when, my neighbor 2 doors down sees one pull into the driveway, they're going to be flabbergasted by it. So,
but it's not going to matter ultimately. Like, they're going to sell for the foreseeable future every single one of them that they produce. And this is why I was kind of talking about last week is I think it's going to be really hard for them to get customer cars out before the end of the year. What I think is the most realistic expectation is that they're going to get units out that they can give to their employees that have put orders in, and they will, for a couple months, since it's such a complex product, probably weed out all those issues and then finally be able to get customer cars rolling. But they definitely didn't do themselves any favors in making it easy.
We've got the because the comps were soda cans and Legos in the Elon email. That is interesting. I mean, I think that the short answer there is it's sort of a BS comparison simply because we've been manufacturing soda cans for many decades at this point. Lego, I don't know when Lego started, but Lego has also been in operation for a long time. This isn't a Tesla engineers aren't smart enough. This isn't a condemnation of people who are working there, what they're able to do. I think this is merely a product of creating complex manufacturing processes is difficult and it takes a lot of time to sort out. And because Tesla is working on this always kind of accelerated cadence, or at least that's what the rhetoric is, it makes it an easy target for them to be called out when they're not doing it right. That said, quickly, before we finish on our Cybertruck segment this time, Laycee, you had some really interesting other insights as we were looking at that particular production Cybertruck 2 and some of the lighting elements you saw. Can you just run through those with us too? Because I thought that was insightful.
Yeah, someone posted on Twitter some more pictures of a Cybertruck parked on the side of the road. I don't know where it was at, but essentially what we saw from in those pictures is that in the Cybertruck there's ambient lighting. And the front camera is being utilized, which is, if you don't know about this, like the Tesla vehicles don't have a front camera view. They use sensors, but they have the side camera views and the rear camera views. So you don't get that like 360 degree over the top view like some of the other competitors have and some of the legacy automakers have. So very cool to see that Tesla is on a vehicle that really needs it, on the Cybertruck, putting in a front camera for one. And it's kind of interesting as well, though, because considering this is made, it's a tank. Like, it's not. Maybe you'll damage the car in front of you, but you ain't damaging your car as far as the stainless steel profile and that big ass bumper in the front. But essentially, the ambient lighting really stuck out to me because Tesla's not really known for being like adding anything that they don't need, because that adds on cost and they're really about maximizing profit margins. So I just thought that was really interesting that they're including ambient lighting. I think they're getting to this stage where they know now they need to step up their game. And if they want to compete with those Germans or the luxury brands that are, people paying that price point, they expect certain things. And I know ambient lighting is just this fun little thing, but if you're buying a car, you want to have what you expect out of that price point and those little creature comforts to make it, feel special to you. So I just thought that was super interesting that they're including those types of things at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. The camera specifically is fascinating to me because somebody can call me out if I'm mistaken, but I think that up to this point, all Tesla models have had a ubiquitous suite of sensors, right? So they've had the same cameras and the same sensor array on every vehicle, and I think that helps with the cost, right? Like if you're not doing kind of individual builds for different vehicles, then you can keep the production cost down. So it does make me wonder, if Cybertruck is getting a front camera, does that mean everything else kind of post Cybertruck production might also be on at least, would there be a front camera available, right? And what is that? What are the follow-on effects for things like, the full self-driving program? Yeah, exactly. Yep. Really.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So it actually kind of really freaks me out because if that front camera is any kind of safety feature, if it's in any way connected to the autonomy. So one of the reasons that the sensors have all been the same is because that means that you can use the same wiring harness for the sensors. So that reduces the complexity of building the wiring harness for the car, which is a very complex part of building a car. And reducing the complexity of the wiring harness has been something that Tesla has been very focused on reducing the length of wire that's in it and making that kind of a more automated process. It's something that all automakers are interested in, but ultimately, generally, they do actually end up being like literally made by hand. And you can see the impact of the Ukrainian factories having to shut down on their current automotive supply chain. But the Cybertruck is a huge stainless steel box. I suspect that front camera is wirelessly connected because that's something that they've been pursuing. And I don't know if I love that as a concept, because like wireless connectivity in cars is very difficult because they have large pieces of metal. The A-frame is frequently something that would block having extremely high speed wireless communication. And obviously, like if it is something like a camera, it needs to be immediate, not kind of like a slight delay in terms of visual input. So
especially if it's involved in a driving, you want as little latency as possible. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Well, listen, Elon, if you're watching, or if one of your guys are watching, let us know. Is the front camera on Cybertruck wireless? We would love to get that scoop.
I mean, you can come on our podcast. You can be a guest.
Exactly. We are soliciting ideas for guests. We want to throw that out there. We're almost at time today, but first of all, I want to throw it out to you guys watching live and anybody who's seeing this after the fact. If you have ideas for people that you would like to see as guests on the InsideEVs podcast, go ahead and put them in the comments. We'd love to read them. We may or may not be able to procure those people, but we would love to give it a shot anyways. Elon obviously is welcome to come on. I think it might be a fascinating but very well viewed podcast if that were the case. If you could snap your fingers and have a guest on next week, who would it be?
That's a tough one to answer.
So I've already actually spoken to Seth about this, but the Formula E driver and in fact champion, Lucas Di Grassi, who's very interested in electric mobility, he's a quote machine. He has a lot of opinions. I get on very well with him. And I said I'd message him before and I didn't do it, and I will do it now.
Yeah,
That would be awesome.
That would be incredible. Yeah.
Because he's involved not only with Formula E, but he's got so many other things that he's doing as far as like sustainable. He's really all about electric vehicles. He has his own like scooter racing series, which is just so cool, I think.
Yeah, the e-scooter thing, and like he's got a lot of interests in like general e-mobility.
Well, let's see if we can make that happen. I also have to point out, Rory Carroll, the editor-in-chief of Jalopnik, has the receipts for this, but I did suggest when Bird scooters first descended on Detroit, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that, that we round up a bunch of them and have a race, maybe replicating the original layout of the Detroit GP on Bird scooters in the middle of the night. Nobody wanted to do it. Yeah, Doug DeMuro would be great. We could probably reach out to Doug and see if he wants to come on. For me, now after the conversation that we had earlier, and this is kind of a lofty goal, but I think that we should try and get Seinfeld so that we can talk cars with him, but also talk EVs with him.
Dude, he hates them. He hates them. And he tried to get Dax to say, like, you hate them too, right? I was like, oh, come on, Jerry. I like you, but that's not good.
Well, we can bring him some proof points and change his mind a little bit, but. How about you, Laycee? Who's your all-star podcast guest at this point?
I think it'd be cool to also have Jay Leno now that I'm thinking on that line of celebrities.
Sure,
he's been about the EVs for a while. He's got quite a few in his collection and he likes them. So I think it'd be interesting to talk about his ownership experience and what the realities are and like what he would tell to the normal average person that's kind of anxious to get into it.
Yeah, anyone who's driven literally everything, I think, is welcome to come on whenever they have the opportunity. So, but let us know in comments, guys, who you'd like to see, and we'll do our best. We'd love to have some guests on the show. Next week, I expect you're going to have Mr. Goy back. It's always fun to see who in our rotating cast of our own internal all-star hosts are going to show up for the InsideEVs podcast. But I can tell you that we're going to be back on next week, Friday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. So we would love to have you here. Please do check us out. For those of you who are watching subscribe to the InsideEVs YouTube channel. For sure, we would like to have that so you can get alerted when we go on and you have a better chance of coming on, asking questions and participating. And of course, you can find this podcast everywhere you get your podcasts. I am not going to list them because I just am sort of basic and I use iTunes, which is not that exciting. But thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Miss GoElectric. Thank you, Kyle, super producer Kyle, for struggling through. He's very ill. We need him to go to bed afterwards. We wish Alex a swift recovery from his illness as well. And I will talk to you all next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.